pretty good crowd. Thank y'all for coming. I appreciate you coming. Before we get started, y'all get your phones and put them on vibrate, please, or turn them off, or something. Well, they won't go off in the middle of the meeting, please. Don't forget to turn them back on. Good to see everyone. I see some new faces out here. I'm glad to have. But we're going to get started. We got a big program for you tonight. I hope you enjoy it. If Brother Bobby comes, and we'll do hats off. If you don't know the pledges, they're on the back page. When we do our pledges, if you don't know the pledges, you can read them off, but join in with us. If everybody would stand, please.
Before we have a prayer, I want to make a mention about Bob Adair. He was in the hospital the last time we were meeting together. He's at home. He's gotten rid of the pneumonia, but we still need to keep him in our prayers. He's got a long way to go to recover, and so he'll be able to come back. So let's go to the Lord in prayer as we begin. Father, we thank you for this beautiful day, Lord, for another opportunity, Lord, to serve you. We pray, Lord, that you just bless tonight. And Father, we lift up our comrade, Bob Adair, and Father, ask you to continue to bless him and to heal his body, to strengthen him, Father, Lord, that he can get back to his normal routine, that he can be able to come back to be with us. Father, just pray that you just be with our speaker tonight, Lord, as he shares his presentation, Father. And Father, we just pray that you just your will be done tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. We're going to do our pledges and salutes. First, the United States flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Salute to the Mississippi flag. I salute the flag of Mississippi and the sovereign state for which it stands, with pride in history and achievements, and confidence in the future, under the guidance of Almighty God. Now, as the Confederate flag comes down, we're going to think about our ancestors. Salute. I salute the Confederate flag with affection, reverence, and undying devotion to the cause for which it stands. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening.
We have got a pretty good speaker tonight. He's been with us before, and we're going to have him some more. He's one of the most versatile speakers that we've ever had in our presence, and we think the world of it. He give us good tours, and his name is Brandon Beck, Dr. Brandon Beck, excuse me. He's retired from Shenandoah University up in Virginia, and he wrote books up there, quite a few, and he's been living, he moved down here, how long ago?
12 years.
12 years ago. And now he's wrote all about the Western theater. So the man knows what he's talking about. We can all learn a lot from him. And he's going to speak to us tonight on something that we don't hear a whole lot about. The great locomotive chase. So, without further ado, Mr. Brandon Beck.
I'm definitely not one of the new faces Marty talked about. I think this is the 8th or 9th time I've been here over the past 12 years. It's my favorite place to come. I appreciate y'all having me back again. Before I start to talk about the great locomotive chase, I want to say a word or two about the greatest living historian of the South and the greatest living historian of the war. That's Dr. Charles P. Rowland, retired professor emeritus, University of Kentucky, whose 100th birthday was the 8th of this month. He no longer travels, of course. He's in fairly good health. He is a giant among historians. Earlier this week, his wife of 70 years died, and we all know what often happens when couples that has been together that long are suddenly parted. So I would ask you to keep Dr. Rowland in your thoughts and prayers. He is a wonderful writer of history, and at the end I can give you a couple of titles of books that I think every Southerner ought to be familiar with. In World War II, he was Captain Charles Rowland, 99th Infantry Division. He was D-Day +6. He was in the Battle of the Bulge. He came through the worst of the Battle of the Bulge. And it was when he got back to the United States after the war that he decided to embark on a career in academic history. He taught at Tulane, he taught at the University of Kentucky. Charles P. Rowland. We will never see the like of him again in this country. He spans the war between the states, the Second World War, and our present age. I wanted to talk to you all about the great locomotive chase, which, as Bob Joe said, is not something we hear very much about, although there have been 3 movies about it. If you know the name of one of those movies, you know the name of 2 movies called The Great Locomotive Chase. But the movie I want to point your attention to is the movie from which I think all of us have one scene in our mind, and that is the old movie Gone from the Wind. And whenever I think of the movie Gone with the Wind, I see that Atlanta Union Depot there with that sea of wounded men, wounded Confederate soldiers, stretched out in that great open space in front of the terminal in Atlanta. That terminal Atlanta is the Western and Atlantic Railroad Terminal. That's the railroad that was affected in the Great Locomotive Chase. Now those soldiers, those are Confederate soldiers, just prior to Hood's evacuation of Atlanta. Those soldiers going south. They're not going to ride the Western Atlantic northbound. The Western Atlantic is now in Yankee hands, and it's one of the primary reasons that they were able to take Atlanta in 1864. The Western Atlantic was a 137-mile railroad that ran between Atlanta and Chattanooga. It was built by the state of Georgia, for the state of Georgia. And the traffic on the Western Atlantic was almost always loads going north and empties coming south. It was built for the benefit of the state of Georgia, to get Georgia produce up to the Tennessee River. The 2 most famous engines in the Great Locomotive Chase, one of them I have portrayed on the cover of the handout. This is the engine General. This engine was built in 1859. Built in 1854. It was added to the Western Atlantic roster in 1859. There were 54 engines on the roster. The General and its sister engine, the Texas, were the studs of the locomotive stable, so to speak. They were the biggest, the most powerful, the fastest engines on the line. The General is the engine that was stolen, and the Texas is the engine that overtook the General and caught the locomotive thieves just north of Ringgold, Georgia. This locomotive, of course, is by comparison to the locomotives that saved this country, helped save this country in World War II. This locomotive is a tea kettle by comparison. It was a fine engine in its day, but of course, compared to the engines of the World War II era, tea kettle is a good word. Tea kettle is a good word for it. And if you look at the second page of the handout, just for purposes of comparison, I've got a picture of one of 5 what we call superpower locomotives that the Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac Railroad ordered in 1935, 1936. This type of locomotive was generally known throughout the railroad industry as a northern engine. That was the generic type of an engine with 4 lead wheels, 4 drivers, and 4 wheels under the cab and the firebox. But the RF&P is a Virginia-born, Virginia-bred railroad, and they were not about to call their superpower locomotives Northerns. They called them Generals, and they named each one of them for a Confederate general. And here you have the Stonewall Jackson, and on the back of the card are some of the specifics, some of the statistics for the Stonewall Jackson. And on the next page of the handout, I've got the comparison between the General and the Texas engines at that time with the RF&P engines. World War II, that era was the last era, I think, in which most Americans were generally conscious of railroads and what they meant to the country, and not just in railroad history, but in present-day railroad operations. The railroads really were, 1941, 1945, they really were the workhorses of the arsenal of democracy. And we got used to that. And I invite you at the end, if you come up, I've got 5 or 6 full-page advertisements from magazines like Look and Life and Collier and the Saturday Evening Post. The railroads ran these ads all the time during those years. And I'm going to send around a copy, not a copy, but an original Pennsylvania Railroad timetable from 1943. And if you look at the cover of the timetable, you can just see the extent to which the railroads and the flag were identified with each other, where American industry and American war effort, the railroad industry and the war effort, are seen as 2 different sides, 2 different ways of saying the same thing. We'll never get back to that again. And especially, we'll never get back to the point where during the World War II era, we had locomotives named for Confederate generals serving Uncle Sam in the war in Europe and the war in the Pacific as well. But that was a different country than the one we live in now. If the Second World War was the last railroad war, the war between the states was the first. And the first most important railroad in the Southern Confederacy was the Western Atlantic Railroad. If you could go to the first map in the handout, we can look at the Western Atlantic from a pretty high altitude. It's 137 miles from Atlanta, railroad miles from Atlanta to Chattanooga. Chattanooga and Atlanta were the 2 most important railroad junctions in the South, and the Western Atlantic was the connecting link between them. The Western Atlantic was the most important line of supply for the Army of Tennessee from the beginning of the war until the end of the war, and it was the second most important line of supply for Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. That comes as a surprise, I think, to many people to know how much Georgia produce coming into Atlanta from the South, not on the Western Atlantic, but then traffic made over, produce made over, loads made over into W&A trains, and then headed north as far as Dalton, and then trains headed for Braxton Bragg's Army would go to the northwest, or heading for Knoxville, Bristol, Lynchburg, and eventually Richmond and Charleston, South Carolina, Lee's line of supply. But there is a better way, I think, of remembering how important the Western Atlantic Railroad was. The North made 2 attempts to wreck that railroad and knock an important logistical leg out from underneath the Confederacy. The second attempt, I've talked to you all about before, the second attempt was the Strait Raid, Able Straits Raid, which came from Murfreesboro clear across North Alabama. Strait was aiming for the Western Atlantic Railroad. And it was only because of Forrest and a 15-year-old girl. Forrest got amazing help from an unlikely source, 15-year-old Emma Sanson, that Strait's raid was defeated and Strait and his entire command were captured. But the first attempt at the Western Atlantic Railroad we know as the Great Locomotive Chase. And here the railroad was able to defend itself. The Confederate Army is not involved in the Great Locomotive Chase. The railroad was its own, practically its own country. And the railroad defended itself, particularly William Fuller. Well, we'll talk about him in just a second. But William Fuller, the conductor of the stolen train, without any help from the Army or anybody else, was able to recover his train. He did get help from an unlikely source, and that was a broken down, retired, worn out little switch engine in Etowah, Georgia. It wasn't even on the Western Atlantic Railroad roster. That engine was named the Yonah. And without the Yonah, not even Fuller would have been able to overtake and recapture his train. Let me lay out the plan, the Union plan for the operation that follows. And let's stay on this map and let's look at Huntsville. Let's look at Huntsville, Alabama. When the Union Army at Nashville was moved west to save Grant at Shiloh early in April, Chattanooga and Atlanta took a tremendous sigh of relief because that meant the main Yankee campaign was not coming for Chattanooga and for Atlanta. But there was one federal division that did not go west to save Grant, and that federal division was commanded by an officer named Ormsby Mitchell. Mitchell was what newspapers today would call a headline grabber. He thirsted for headlines. He thirsted for some kind of military glory. And he was disappointed to have been left behind when Buell's army went west to save Grant. But not to worry, because Mitchell was visited one day in his headquarters by a man who offered him the world as far as headlines and glory were concerned. This man is a man with a past about which we know nothing, and a plan which he explained to Mitchell, who listened with growing interest. The man is James J. Andrews, a Kentucky-born spy for sure, smuggler for sure, possibly a double agent. Ormsby checked him out, so to speak, and Ormsby Mitchell checked him out, so to speak, and found that he had been in his superior officer's employ before, and so Mitchell listened with a great deal of interest and a feeling of some security of what he was hearing. This is the plan that Andrews offers to General Ormsby Mitchell. The plan has two moving parts. They have to take place on the same day. This operation hangs by a slender thread, and that thread is that both operations go off on the same day. You'll see why in just a minute. Moving part number one. Mitchell, with his division, will occupy Huntsville, Alabama, early on the morning of the 11th of April, 1862. And then, for the rest of that day, Mitchell's division will move east along the railroad towards Chattanooga. That same day, James J. Andrews, with 23, 24, 25 federal volunteers from Mitchell's division, these soldiers going to be dressed in civilian clothes, will seize the northbound train from Atlanta to Chattanooga. They will, in modern terms, they will hijack the train and run the train north to Chattanooga, cutting the telegraph wire and burning bridges behind them. Chattanooga at this point is undefended. There seems to be no danger to it. The only way Chattanooga can be saved from Mitchell's advance from Huntsville is if reinforcements come up the railroad from Atlanta. And Andrews' mission is to take the railroad out, cut the wires, burn the bridges. In that way, Chattanooga is going to be isolated and will be served up on a silver platter to this headline-grabbing Union general. I yield, low risk, 22, 23 volunteer soldiers, and Mitchell gives his assent to the plan, and the wheels begin to turn. Andrews recruited 23, 24, 25 volunteers. There's a lot of dispute about the exact number. And told these men that you were to go in groups of 2 and 3 from Shelbyville, Texas, Tennessee from where it started. Go in groups of 2 or 3 to Marietta, Georgia. Marietta is the first stop on the line north of Atlanta. Check into the hotel at Marietta near the railroad. And on the morning of the 11th, we are all going to board the passenger cars of the northbound train to Chattanooga. At the next stop, which is Big Shanty, Kennesaw today, when everybody goes in for the customary breakfast, we are going to linger outside. We're going to pull the pin that connects the 2 boxcars trailing the engine from the 3 passenger cars making up the rest of the train. You all volunteers get in the 2 boxcars. Andrews and his locomotive crew will board the engine, and they will head north on their mission of destruction. It hung on a very slender thread, and that thread was that both operations take place on the same day, but Andrews was late. Andrews was late a day. Don't know exactly why. Either enough of his volunteers didn't make it in time, or what I think is more likely, it has to do with those 2 boxcars that are going to be behind the engine and ahead of the passenger cars. Those boxcars aren't usually there. I think that Andrews had inside help on the railroad to have him 2 boxcars empty behind the engine. I think he couldn't get them on the 11th. Unless he has the boxcars, he can't convey his soldiers. He can't move the soldiers. So I think he waited until the 12th when the yard master, whoever it was working with him, could ensure that the boxcars are going to be there. By waiting a day, Andrews practically doomed the thing to failure. Why? This I think is fascinating. The Western Atlanta is single-track railroad with passing sidings. Andrews knows the W&A schedule. He's got the schedule. He knows what trains southbound he is going to have to meet and what time he has to be at this passing siding, that passing siding, the other passing siding, to keep the traffic moving and keep him going northbound. But with Mitchell closing in on Chattanooga on the 11th, every Western and Atlantic dispatcher in Chattanooga is going to put every engine, every empty car in Chattanooga that he can lay his hands on and have those trains headed south to Atlanta to keep them out of Mitchell's hands, to keep them out of Yankee hands in Chattanooga. And so the single-track railroad in peacetime on the 11th of April becomes a single-track railroad in wartime on the 12th of April, and Andrews has no idea what kind of extra trains that are not regularly scheduled are called extras. He has no idea of the number of extras that are going to be coming south, impeding his progress. There was another, and this is just as important, but I think just as fascinating. We do not know who the conductor on the train northbound from Atlanta to Chattanooga on the 11th was. Don't know who it was. We know who it wasn't because William Fuller was the conductor on the 12th. He was scheduled to be the conductor on the 12th. And Andrews is going to find out that there is no man on the Western and Atlantic Railroad more dangerous to him, probably no man in Georgia more dangerous to him than William Fuller, the conductor of the train on the 12th of April, 1862. If Andrews had been on time, he'd have missed Fuller. But he's late, and he's going to have Fuller to contend with. Also, the 11th was clear as a bell. There was a lot of rain on the 12th. Makes it hard to burn bridges. More or less heavy rain. But the main factor are the southbound extras and William Fuller. You got the southbound extras coming at him, and William Fuller, as you'll see in a minute, coming after him. The first stage of the plan goes off like clockwork. They stole the train, they pulled the pin. Andrews got his men in the boxcars, got his crew up in the engine, and off they go northbound. Fuller hears the train leaving, bolted out the door of the restaurant, saw the train disappearing, and took off after that train on foot. Went after his train on foot. Let's go to the last page, second to last page of the handout. Fuller chased that train either on foot or in a handcar from Big Shanty through Allatoona to Etowah, Georgia. Andrews had already passed through Etowah, and they had seen off on a sidetrack a worn-out, broken-down looking switch engine called the Yonah that works the line that goes from Etowah east to the Iron Works, not even a Western Atlantic engine, not even on the WNA roster. Some of those in Andrews' engine crew wanted to stop and disable that engine. They should have. But Andrews thought it would attract unnecessary attention. He had no idea he was being pursued anyway. And he said, we're going on. So they left that mobile engine there behind them. And when Fuller finally reaches Etowah on his hand, he sees he's got a locomotive now to take up the pursuit. And so from Etowah to Kingston, Georgia, Kingston is halfway. From Etowah to Kingston, Fuller is probably not gaining much ground, but he's not losing any ground either. And if you go to the next page, you'll see that all he had to do was not lose ground. This is a schematic map of Kingston, Georgia. It's a halfway point on the railroad. Andrews' train has come in from the right-hand margin, headed north. And when Andrews cleared the depot at Kingston, he was told, you're going to have to wait. There's a southbound extra on the line ahead of you, and you're going to have to wait here until it clears before you go. And Andrews raised, pardon my language, Andrews raised hell. He had the perfect story. He said, Chattanooga is in danger. I have a load of gunpowder here for General Beauregard, last ditch effort to defend Chattanooga. I have to be let through. And the dispatcher's telling me, we appreciate the seriousness of your mission, but we can't have a head-on collision on the line either, so you're going to have to wait. Andrews waited for one southbound to clear, and it cleared, and he told his crew to go ahead, and a second southbound, he was told a second southbound extra is only a few miles behind the first. You're going to have to wait again. He had to wait, there's some dispute, he had to wait either for 2 or for 3 southbound extras to clear before he can move on north up the line. Now, he's lost about an hour and a half at this point. And now the plot takes another twist. if you look at the line that comes in from the lower left-hand corner of the map, that line is coming in from the west. That is an 18-mile railroad connecting Kingston with Rome. And while Andrew's train is waiting for southbounds to clear, the morning train from Rome comes onto the map in the left-hand corner and bears left at that switch, you see. This is a Y. This is what railroad men call a Y. This is how you turn a train without a turntable. The train from Rome is going to bear left at the switch, go all the way up to the next switch, still on the siding, and then back down to the depot. And when it is time for that train to make the run back to Rome, the switch in front of it will be turned and it will come down the other leg of the Y and go back out so that the engine can lead the train rather than run in reverse all the way. Andrews led, the train from Rome is in. It was pulled by a fine engine, not the equal of the General, but a fine engine named the William R. Smith. So it's standing there. Andrews leaves. One of Andrews' men in the boxcar, who wrote about this afterwards, William Pitcher, said, as we left Kingston, we heard whistle behind us. And at that point, we knew that we were being pursued. Fuller steams in practically as Andrews steamed out. Fuller commandeered the Rome train's engine for himself. He left the little switch engine behind and commandeered the Rome train's engine for himself. And at this point, it's all over but the shouting. Andrews now there's one further obstacle. Andrews is now being hotly pursued. Andrews, begins now to run the General faster than it or any other conveyance on this planet down to this time in history was meant to run. I don't think that there is a time in the history of mankind before this day that human beings ever went 55 or 60 miles an hour. I don't know when it would have been. I don't know when it would have been. We've gone basically the same speed on the ground that we have since the days of ancient Rome. I don't know when we would have gone that fast before in human history, but that's the speed that Andrews made, because he's got to clear one last southbound train at Adairsville, and that train is pulled by the locomotive Texas. Andrews gets to Adairsville running 60 miles an hour, gets to Adairsville just in time to stop the Texas before it leaves its siding, gets on the southbound lane. He talks to the engineer of the Texas, Mr. Peter Bracken, into backing his train back onto the siding so that Andrews could clear. Andrews clears, the Texas begins to steam south, coming north. Fuller's engineer saw it. Both engines put their brakes on in time, and Fuller commandeered the engine Texas. He told Mr. Bracken, back your train into Adairsville, drop these freight cars in that siding. And we're going after my train. We're going to run our engine in reverse. We're going after my train. And it's a conductor's railroad. Trains are the conductors have a proprietary interest and feeling for the trains. Not the engineer's train, it's always the conductor's train. And Bracken, of course, did as he was told. If you go back to the map, the second to last map, from Adairsville to Calhoun, across the river at Resaca, on into Dalton, switching over to the northeast-bound line at Dalton through the tunnel at Tunnel Hill. That tunnel is 1,180 feet long, single-track railroad tunnel, 1,180 feet long. It's no longer used, but the guides will take you through that tunnel on a golf cart at about 15 miles an hour. It'll scare the daylights out of you at 15 miles an hour, rocketing along that narrow channel, that little bit of light way up ahead is it. I couldn't imagine going through there at 55 or 60 miles an hour. With the engines are now in sight of each other. The engines are now in sight of each other. Andrews raced through the station at Dalton, raced through the station at Ringgold, and at Ringgold he is just about out of, I'm about to say coal, these are wood-burning engines, just about out of wood, and he's just about out of water, and he can't make steam any longer. And so he ordered his men to abandon the train. They put the train in reverse, hoping to wreck the pursuit at least. They were all caught. Peter Bracken stopped his engine in plenty of time, and they coupled up to the general, just smooth as glass. Andrews and his men were captured very soon after abandoning the train. Andrews was hanged, along with 7 others of his men. Those who survived were awarded the first Congressional Medals of Honor award. I don't know why they were. I don't know why spies who did nothing but ride all day in a boxcar were awarded Congressional Medals of Honor. But Andrews and 7 others were hanged. And Fuller, who had pursued, I'll close on this gruesome note, Fuller, who had pursued Andrews on foot and with the Yonah and the Texas, until Andrews had been captured, did not give up his pursuit of Andrews until he went to see Andrews hanged. Andrews was hanged at the intersection of Juniper and 3rd Avenues in what is now downtown Atlanta. And the story that several witnesses tell, Fuller didn't mention it, so I have to wonder if it really happened. But the story that several witnesses told that when Andrews was hanged, he was a big man, he was a tall man, and when he came through the trap, his feet hit the ground, and that a soldier had to run out with a shovel and dig away from beneath his feet. I don't know what, I think Fuller might have mentioned that if that had happened, maybe not. But in any event, that was the locomotive chase, and you see that although the railroad needed Forrest and Emma Sanson, the next spring, in the spring of '62, the railroad was able to take care of itself. When I was young, I used to travel with my father quite frequently on trains in Georgia, and I noticed that my father always called conductors. He always called them captain. And I asked him about that, and he told me what I later found to be true. He told me that after the locomotive chase, Governor Brown of Georgia formed what he called the State Road Militia. He made all the railroad employees part of what we would call the Georgia National Guard. And William Fuller was given the rank of captain for the State Road Guard. And I did notice that every conductor whom my father addressed as captain seemed to understand exactly what the history behind that was. I thank you very much for your attention.
Why did the Confederates hang on?
I don't know.
They ran out of rope.
Yeah.
I don't know why they didn't hang on. They were soldiers in civilian clothing, captured behind enemy lines. Looks like an open and shut case. But it was only Andrews and 7 others who were hanged. If anybody would be interested in the book, I'd be happy to sign.
Yes.
And thank you again for having me back.
Thank you. Y'all hear that? You hear that, Bill? He said he'd rather speak here than anywhere.
That's true.
And I guarantee you'll be back, brother. We love you. If anybody wants to buy a book, we're going to let the band play a song right quick. And if you want to get a book and signed by Mr. Beck, right now's the time to do it.
Martin?
Also, Lee has got a book over here too that I've got to give for. But book signing and binding is time right now.
I was standing by my window, all cold by day, when I saw that first come rolling for to carry my mother away. How will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better on the way in the sky, Lord, in the sky. I said, wait, undertaker, please ride close. All that way you are carrying, Lord, I hate to see her go. How will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better on the way in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
Talking to Brandon earlier, and heck yeah, we went to Georgia, and we went to Ringo,
All I could hide my sorrow when they laid her in the grave. Now in the circle we are broken, by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better on the way in the sky, Lord, in the sky. We went back home, my home was lonesome, I was hungry, all my brothers just was crying, oh so sad,
that's a pretty cool place.
alone.
Big old statue.
Now will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by, by and by. There's a better on the way in the sky, Lord, in the sang a song of our childhood, songs of faith that made us strong. Songs that mothers maybe have taught us. Hear the angels sing along. Now in the circle be unbroken, by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a man on the way in the sky, Lord,
Thank you. Do you guys enjoy the members meeting, entertainment that we have? Yeah. I think everybody does. Mike is gonna do our minutes, please.
Read the minutes real quick. Before I knew, we've got some guests from Calhoun Avengers here. Brenda Hart.
Thank you all again. Good night.
Mike Frank.
Thanks, sir.
They're selling raffles on an electric train right there in here. We'll show it to you. It's really good. They're going to draw on this. You don't have to be present at the convention in Biloxi.
You don't have to be present.
No, you don't have to be present. And the tickets are $5, free for 10.
What's the name of it?
Okay. Y'all go back and look at it if you don't know what it is. It's the old-fashioned electric train. Transformer.
It just be at tonight's program
Civil
too,
War.
don't it?
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, it's just like you talked about.
Oh, that's what you're doing, you're calling it. Okay.
Okay. April 5th meeting. Commander Hubbard opened the meeting at 7 p.m. to welcome guests. Chaplain Bobby Irvin opened to lead the prayer. Color Sergeant Bill Adair led the pledge of the United States, salutes the Mississippi Confederate flag. Historian Bobby McCommon introduced guest speaker Pat River of North Park, Mississippi, who gave a historical and educational program on Tom Dula of Wilkes County, North Carolina, and Ann Foster before and after the Civil War. Hang down your head, Tom. First Lieutenant Commander Bill Baker and Second Lieutenant Commander Jim Daniels gave an update on the Confederate Memorial Day service to be held at the Tippah County Confederate Monument on Monday, April 30th at 5:30 p.m. The guest speaker will be Wes Teal, who will portray President Jefferson Davis, that he did a good job. And Bill and Special Jim, thanks a lot, fellas. That was one of the best ones we had out there. Commander Hubbard covered. All that wanted to be included in the Tippah Tigers May need to pay the money. And it's worth it. It really is. Greg Smith from Greg's Gun Shop, a member of the SCV, has allowed the camp to purchase a gun at his cost, an 870 20-gauge shotgun for the camp to seek donations on exchange for tickets on the gun. Anyone given $5 will receive a $1 ticket for one ticket for $5, one ticket for $5 to 5 for 20. And if anybody needs any more, I'll get some more up front. And try to draw on this at our next meeting. So, Lee Miller told the camp about the land that was purchased by the Memphis SCB camp and the flagpole of 130 feet that is being installed there. An anonymous donation in the name of the Tippah Tigers of $1,300 were presented, and the motion was made for the Tippah Tiger door prize fund to finish up to make it $1,500 for the battle flag that will be flown. New member Stephen Smith was presented his membership certificate. Door prizes were awarded to Kimmy Dobbs, Rick Adair, Randy Bishop, and Cindy Smith. Bill Latham reminded all members to get him anything for the camp scrapbook. Within the last year, he's got some photographs. We're taking photographs tonight, so watch it, people. He's very on candid. Be careful. It may be in the scrapbook. The chaplain Irvin looked in the closing prayer. The group is dismissed to singing a Dixie at 8:25. Tickets for that electric train back here.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Anyone like to make a motion that our minutes have been read? Charles, anyone second? Bobby? All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you, Mike. All right, we got little business and some really good business. I don't know where to start. I got so much here. The gun raffle, that y'all forget the gun raffle Mike mentioned. If you want tickets, make sure you get them before you leave. We need to sell as many as we can. Of course, all the proceeds goes to the camp. I mean, that's just going in our bank account. So if you feel like you want to help and sell a few tickets for us, get all you want. I'm sure Mike will let you have as many as you want. Kimmy Dobbs, he mentioned Kimmy Dobbs. He's in the hospital with Ripley. He called me, I guess it was about 1 o'clock, and he had just come through the emergency room. He was having chest pains. And he called me. They done got him in a room already. This was about 1:30, I guess. And they think he was just dehydrated.
but they're gonna watch and monitor him tonight, make sure, you know, that that's what it is. So I'm sure they're putting a lot of fluids in him right now, IV and all that, so.
He's been moving, so hopefully it's just been a
Yeah,
little
and
stressed
he
out
has,
moving and.
he's had a lot on him here lately. You know, he bought a house and the people that are living in it are not, hadn't got out yet. And so it's been a little challenging for him. So, but y'all keep him in prayers. Hopefully he'll be back with us next month. Our Confederate Memorial Day, Mike mentioned it, but I'm gonna mention it again, was probably the best one we ever had. Y'all agree, the ones that went it good? It was really good. Mr. Jim, hold up your hand. Y'all see Jim? Stand up, Jim. Bill Baker, where you at? Stand up. Y'all give these two gentlemen a hand. All right, sit down. I tell you what, these two guys worked hard on this. They did. Actually, the first and second lieutenant commander is in charge of that event. Not the commander, but I've always done things. But I let them have it this year, and they rock and roll with it. I mean, done a great job. It's going to be hard to beat it next year, isn't it? It's going to be hard to beat. But anyway, we had a good turnout. The weather was perfect. The band sounded excellent. Rick, you guys done a superb job. Looking forward to our next outdoor event, which I guess will be Tippah Lake, won't it? But anyway, you guys was super. Everything just went over really well. I'd like to do another special. I got several special thanks too. First one, Ronnie Richardson. Where you at, Ron? Hold up your hand. Stand up, Ronnie, where everybody see you. Hey, Ronnie. I don't mean to be embarrassing or nothing, but Ronnie, and thanks to him and Dabney Nursery, where he works at, they furnished our plants behind the statue, and I'll just tell off of myself. Ronnie got them and had the plants for a few days, and we talked about when he and I was going to go plant them. And oh, it will take us about an hour. Well, Jim Daniels and Rex Brotherton twisted my arm, and I went metal detecting Saturday morning with them. And Ronnie went up there to that courthouse and planted those plants by himself. Now, ain't that something? I didn't want y'all to know that. But, so anyway, Ronnie and I went up there Sunday morning then, and we went to Walmart and got some mulch and mulched it. But it turned out pretty, didn't it? Did y'all see how pretty it was? But we're really proud of that. All we like now is the base around the statue, the grass isn't growing good, because you got concrete under the bottom of it, and you got about less than a half inch or inch dirt on top of that slab that the statue's sitting on. So we're going to shovel all that off. We're going to put some border around the edge of that concrete. It's a big slab right up under the statue. And we're going to put white rock on the ground around it. And then we'll have border like you see on these, you know, restaurant businesses, where that border separating the grass from the rock. We're going to put that border around it. And then hopefully that'll look good. So, but that's the only thing we like now. I want to say a special thanks to Bobby. Stand up, Bobby. Be recognized. Mike Malden, where you at? He's already standing. Give these guys a hand. If y'all been with me through the few months, I've pushed this pretty hard, wanting that plaque. Right, Joey?
Got it.
What happened?
Got it.
I got it, didn't I, buddy? I got it, didn't I?
You done with that?
I want to tell you, Forrest didn't give up.
I think we
Tippah Tigers don't either, brother.
Speakers.